Miroslava had always had strange dreams. Since childhood, she had dreamed of places she had never seen and people she didn't know. Sometimes the dreams were vivid and pleasant, but more often they were like nightmares that made her want to run away. Once, after a particularly difficult dream where she saw a dark figure standing at her bedside, she woke up in a cold sweat. It felt like someone was watching her, even though there was no one in the room. "They are just dreams," she told herself, but the fear remained. Miroslava noticed that her dreams began to repeat themselves. She saw the same dark forest, with a house in the center of it. The house seemed abandoned, but a soft light poured from its windows, beckoning her inside. One day, after another dream, she decided to write down what she saw. Her drawings of the house, the forest, and the figures became more and more detailed, as if she was memorizing more each time. A few days later, she came across an article on the internet about strange disappearances of people who complained of recurring nightmares before they disappeared. The article mentioned a man who called himself the Dream Hunter. "It's a coincidence," Miroslava tried to convince herself, but her inner voice whispered, "It's for a reason." That night she dreamed of the house again. This time she ventured inside. The door opened with a quiet creak, and she found herself in a room filled with old mirrors. In each reflection she saw herself, but in one of them stood a stranger. It was a tall man in a long cloak, his face hidden by shadows. "You've come," he said in a low, almost whispered voice. "Who are you?" she asked, feeling her legs shake with fear. "I am the one who guards the borders. You crossed the line, and now we are bound." He held out his hand, and she felt her consciousness begin to pull her back in. Miroslava woke up with the feeling of someone sitting by her bed. She turned on the light, but there was no one in the room. A faint imprint remained on her hand, however, as if someone had squeezed her wrist. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she was horrified to see that her reflection was moving belatedly. After that night, Miroslava couldn't shake the feeling that her life had changed. Every day her reflection in the mirror became stranger and stranger. Sometimes it stared at her a little longer than it should, and sometimes it moved differently, as if it had a life of its own. But most frightening of all were the dreams. Now, when she fell asleep, she was immediately in that very forest. Her feet carried her to the house, though she tried to resist. One night Miroslava entered the house again. This time it looked different. Instead of mirrors, the room was filled with books. Shelves were filled with old, dusty tomes, each of which seemed to know her name. On the center table lay an open book. As Miroslava stepped closer, she saw that the pages of the book were blank except for one line written in the center. "He is watching. You must run." "Who is he?" she whispered. "You know," came a voice behind her. She turned around and saw the hunter again. This time he had removed his hood, and his face appeared scarred, as if someone had tried to erase his features. "Why do you keep coming here?" he asked. "I don't choose this," she shouted out. The hunter laughed hoarsely. "Your dreams are linked to this place now. You brought them here. I want to go back. I don't want to see this." "Go back?" His voice lowered, almost threatening. "Only those who find the truth return." Miroslava woke up screaming. This time her body was shivering from the cold, and under her pillow she found a scrap of paper. On it were written the same words as in the book in her dream. "He is watching. You must run." "It's impossible," she whispered. But that wasn't all. A new text appeared on the paper and slowly revealed itself. "He's closer than you think." Miroslava began to notice that her life in the real world had changed as well. Things in her apartment were moving. The lights in her room flickered, and sometimes she heard light footsteps behind her. One day she noticed something on her desk, an old book she hadn't bought. On the cover were the very symbols she had seen in her dream. She opened it, and the first line read, "Your dreams are the door, and he is the key." Miroslava realized that her dreams weren't just nightmares. They were reality that was searching for a way into her world. Miroslava sat at her desk, holding an old book. Its pages were dotted with symbols and strange texts that she couldn't fully understand. But one thing was clear: everything that was happening was connected to her dreams. She read the line in bold print. "Every time you enter his house, you open the door wider." Miroslava felt her heart race. "If that's true," she whispered, "then I've brought him into my life myself." From the moment she started reading the book, the reality around her began to change. The mirrors in the apartment became strange. They reflected the room, but not herself. The light in them was dimmer, and sometimes figures flickered in the depths of the reflection. One night, awakened by the sensation of someone standing at her bedside, Miroslava turned on the light. No one was there, but there were footprints on the floor of wet footprints, as if someone had just stepped out of water. She followed them, and they led her to a mirror in the hallway. On its surface appeared words written as if in smoke. "You're getting closer." That same night, as she fell asleep, Miroslava found herself back in the forest, but this time the house looked different. Its windows were closed, and the door was slightly ajar, as if inviting her in. When she stepped inside, the room was filled not with books or mirrors, but with rows of figures standing in the shadows. They were motionless, but their heads turned slowly toward her as she took a step. "Who are you?" she whispered, but all she heard in response was a low whisper, and then the hunter emerged from the back of the room. "You came looking for answers," he said, his voice menacing, "but you won't like the answers." "Why me?" she asked. "Why did my dreams become this door?" He didn't answer, but held out an object to her, a small key made of black metal. "This is the key to the truth," he said, "but for every truth there is a price." Miroslava woke up again, but now her hand was clutching the real key. It was cold, and engraved with the same symbols she had seen in the book. A new inscription appeared on its surface. "Use it, but be prepared for what will open." The next day, Miroslava decided to seek help. She called her friend, Artyom, who was into mysticism and strange phenomena. "It sounds like a connection between worlds," he said, scrutinizing the key. "If this key exists in reality, then your dreams aren't just dreams anymore. They are something more." "What should I do?" she asked. Artyom hesitated for a moment. "You have to understand what he wants from you, but remember, such things always require payment." Miroslava looked at the key again, and at that moment the light in the room began to flicker. The hunter's silhouette appeared on the wall like a shadow. "The payment has begun," came his voice. Miroslava could not take her eyes off the shadow on the wall. The hunter's silhouette was motionless, but his presence filled the entire room. Artyom also froze, holding the key in his hand. "You have to open the door," said a voice that sounded like it came from deep inside her mind. "What door? Where is it?" Miroslava whispered. The light flickered again, and the shadow began to move. It pointed to the mirror in the corner of the room. "Your reflection knows the way," said the hunter. Miroslava approached the mirror, and it seemed strangely deep, as if it hid another reality. She lifted the key, and its symbols began to glow with a soft bluish light. "It's not just a mirror," Artyom muttered, stepping back. "It leads somewhere." "If I open it, what will happen?" Miroslava asked, not taking her eyes off the shimmering surface. The hunter's voice came again. "You will find the truth, but the truth may be darker than you think." Miroslava turned the key in the lock that suddenly manifested on the surface of the mirror. As soon as she did so, the mirror flashed, and a wave of cold wind swept over them both. They found themselves in a dark room, lit only by the faint light coming from the symbols carved on the walls. There was a strange odor of dampness and metal in the air. "Where are we?" Artyom asked, looking around. "This is the place between dreams," came the voice of the hunter, who was now standing right in front of them. Miroslava felt a chill run down her spine. "Why did you bring us here?" she asked. The hunter stepped closer, his face partially hidden by his hood. "This place is your prison. It's where the dreams you can't forget gather. Each one becomes a door leading to new nightmares." Miroslava looked around. Scenes from her dreams began to appear on the walls, a house in the woods, shadows in the mirrors, hands reaching out of the darkness. The hunter held out his hand to her. A new key appeared in it, similar to the first, but with a different engraving. "You can free yourself if you open the last door, but this door leads to the very core of your fears." "What happens if I don't open it?" she asked. "Then you will stay here until your dreams consume you." Miroslava squeezed the key, feeling her palm begin to burn from its cold touch. "We'll go with you," Artyom said, but the hunter shook his head. It was her choice, and her way. Miroslava looked at her friend, but then turned to the door that appeared at the end of the room. Her heart was pounding frantically, but she knew there was no turning back. She inserted the key into the lock and the door began to slowly open. Behind it was pitch blackness. As soon as the door swung open, a strong wind filled with whispers blew out of it. Miroslava felt something touch her mind, surfacing from the deepest corners of her memory. Her voice echoed as she screamed into the void. "What do you want from me?" And out of the darkness came a voice she recognized. It was her own. "You should never have opened that door." The darkness coming from behind the door surrounded Miroslava as if it were alive. She felt her body become light, as if she were being carried away. A voice from the darkness, similar to her own, repeated, "You should never have opened that door." "I want to know the truth," she shouted, trying to resist the fear. "The truth?" The voice became mocking. "Then look." When the darkness cleared, Miroslava found herself in a strange room. It was her childhood bedroom, but it looked nothing like she remembered. The colors were faded, the furniture seemed distorted, and mirrors hung on the walls. Each mirror showed episodes from her past, how she had first been afraid of night shadows, how she had been afraid to open the closet at night, how dreams had haunted her since she was a child. "This place is the prison of your fears," said the hunter's voice from behind her. Miroslava turned around. His face was clearer this time. It was her face, only distorted, as if it were reflected in a cracked mirror. "You are me," she whispered, realizing the truth. The hunter grinned. "I am your shadow, the part of you you've always tried to forget, but the more you run away, the stronger I become." Miroslava felt her breathing grow heavy. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, but her voice treacherously trembled. "Are you?" Hunter held out his hand, and the room began to change. Mirrors cracked, and shadow-like figures emerged from their shards. They approached slowly, their eyes glowing with a dim light. "They are here because you gave them life," Hunter said. "Every fear you have is their power." Miroslava realized that this was the moment of truth. She could either keep running or face herself. "You will no longer control me," she said firmly, stepping toward the hunter. He stopped, his mocking expression replaced with surprise. "You can't get rid of me. I'm you." "No," she whispered. "You're just a part of me, and I'm not going to let you run my life anymore." She stepped to the very center of the room, where the cracks from the mirrors began to join together, forming a new symbol. The symbol flashed with a bright light, and the shadows began to fade. The hunter reached out to her, but his silhouette began to dissolve. "Do you think you've won?" he whispered, "but I'll be back." Miroslava woke up on the floor of her apartment, holding onto the key, which was now cracked. The symbols on it no longer glowed. The mirror in the room was intact, but no longer reflected anything strange. She knew the hunter was gone, but the fear he represented was still a part of her. She realized now that the power to fight him had always been within herself. Months passed, and Miroslava no longer had the strange dreams, but she knew that the darkness inside her had not disappeared completely. She learned to accept it, realizing that fear was a part of life. Sometimes, when she looked in the mirror, she still saw a faint shadow, reminding herself, "I am stronger than my fears."